So every day in the morning, when we have Kriyas Torah, we say at Tefillah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should Yekayim Bono Chachmei Yisrael Heim Uneshayim Uvneiim Ivnoiseihem. And one might ask, Chachmei Yisrael deserve a special bracha and a special prayer. But what about their wives and children? Are they any different than any other wives of children? But if one's wife isn't well, then Chachmei Yisrael will be diminished in their ability to inspire and to teach. And therefore, I'm dedicating this Shiur, L'Refuah Shalema, for the Yeshiva's wife, who is presently in the hospital. And what we learned today, and I will keep on davening and dedicate other shiurim as well, L'Refuah Shalema for Sorabela Bas Freida Chaya. Kodesh Baruch Hu said that L'Refuah Shalema min Hashemayim, she should be well, and the Yeshiva should be able, with total calm, be able to keep up his Avodas HaKodesh for many, many wonderful years to teach Torah and to inspire Talmidim. So it will be somewhat of an embarrassment if I say that Rabbi Isaacson, the Rosh Yeshiva, is my driver. I have quite a few drivers. I don't think Rabbi Isaacson is my best driver. But he definitely is the greatest Talmud Chacham of all my drivers. So Baruch Hashem, and our relationship means a lot to me as well. And if Rabbi Isaacson considers himself my Talmud, I could say he's also a Talmud Hamachkim es Rabbi. I've been here many times in the past, and from time to time, it seems to me that there is less and less space in this Beis Medrash. And Baruch Hashem, that the yeshiva is growing and prospering in quantity, in quality, and it is due to the Mesiras Nefesh of Rabbi Isaacson and the entire wonderful staff. I've come to know most of you, and great teachers of Torah and Yiras Shamayim you have in the yeshiva, Ko Yiten Hashem v'Ko Yosif. So I think every time I come and I ask Rabbi Isaacson what to speak about, he says, speak about Torah, the centrality, the importance, the beauty of Torah. And every day in the morning, we quote the Mishnah and Peah, Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Why would learning Torah be the greatest of all mitzvahs? Why would that be? And no other religion, no other culture in the world, in history, is just learning the most important value. Many times, modern people, primarily from America, that have kids in yeshivas in Israel, they ask me, when will my son finish his studies? When will he finally do something productive in the world? When is he going to get his diploma? And I usually respond, when is he going to finish his studies? When time comes, ultimately, in which each and every human being, each and every Jew, comes the time to return his neshama to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is when he will finish his studies. Not even then. You know, he's going to close his Gemara and start learning in Mesifta de Rekia. We never finish our studies because to us, study and learning Torah is not a means to an end, but it is a way of life. Torah is our oxygen. Torah is the air we breathe. Torah is life. And every day in the morning in Berachas Kriyas Shema, Shachris and Arvis, we say, Ki heim chayenu v'oirech yomeinu. That's what we say by Arvis. Ki chayechem v'oirech yomeichem. Why is that? How could this be explained? So the Gemara in Saf Perek Hamid Kedushin says, Talmud Godel shetalmid mevi lidei ma'aseh. Ultimately, you cannot be a good Jew without learning Torah. You cannot be a good Jew without knowing Torah, not only learning. Torah is an end to itself, but fundamentally, essentially, it is a means to an end. Talmud Godel, Talmud Mevi Lidei Maisa. So, unlike all the others in the entire world, Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, all the other people in the world, besides Jews, besides Yidden, have Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, which ultimately boil down to just be a mensch. You know what a mensch is? I think it's in English. Just be a mensch. Don't rob, don't cheat, don't steal, don't kill. Just be a mensch. And when 7 suddenly is transformed and morphed into Taryag 613, covering every aspect and every moment of our lives, Taryag mitzvahs, 24/7, 365 days a year. And Yidden asked, Mi yochol lamoid bekol eila? You need to learn a lot of Torah. So Torah is an end to itself. Torah is mekadesh, Torah is metaya, Torah sanctifies, Torah purifies our neshamas. But essentially, it is, yes, a means to an end. If you want to be a good Jew, you need to learn a lot of Torah. And that is the importance of yeshivas. I think I shared this idea many, many times. The very first institution in Klal Yisrael was the yeshiva. Thousands of years before the first Shiur, we had yeshivas. And the Yom Tov Chavches, the Gemara says, Avraham Zokan v'Yoshe b'yeshiva, Yitzchak Zokan v'Yoshe b'yeshiva, Yankov Zokan v'Yoshe b'yeshiva. The very first Jew was the very first Rosh Yeshiva, and maybe the greatest Rosh Yeshiva in history, because the Rambam writes in the beginning of Hilchos Avodas Kechovim, Nigbetzu Elav Alofim v'Ravavois. Tens of thousands of Talmidim flocked to learn the Torah of Avraham Avinu. Nigbetzu Elav Alofim v'Ravavois. There aren't many Rosh Yeshivas in history who had tens of thousands of Talmidim, especially before the age of the internet. Who could have tens of thousands of Talmidim? And Avraham Avinu had. That's what the Rambam writes. Umiyameim shel avoseinu lo posku yeshiva mehem. Yordu leMitzrayim yeshiva imohem. Yordu leBavel yeshiva imohem. And you remember the pasuk, as Yehuda sholach lefanov. When Yaakov is on his way to Mitzrayim, he sends Yehuda, run ahead as a scout. I wasn't there, but I imagine that Yehuda objected and he said, Abba, why do I need to go alone? We are having such an amazing time. I'm sure Yaakov gave a Shiur Daf Yomi every day. I mean, he was together with his kids, so they learned every day. And just being in the presence of Yaakov Avinu, what an amazing experience. And Yehuda objects and he says, Abba, why do I need to put I need to run ahead alone. We're all together. We're learning. We're talking. Let's stay together. And Rashi brings Chazal. Letaken loy beis Talmud. I want you to open a kollel, open a besmedish. And Yehuda says, Abba, you know you could trust me. We'll get there. I'll have a kollel for you. Let's first get there. And Yaakov Avinu says, Yehuda, you don't get it. My foot I will not step into a town unless there's a besmedish there waiting for me. Run ahead, as I said, letaken loy beis Talmud. It took thousands of years till Anshe Knesses HaGedolah instituted 3 tefillas every day and Kaddish and Kedusha, which necessitate a minyan. It is only then that we had shuls. Because as long as Anshe Knesses HaGedolah weren't metakan 3 tefillas every day, and there was no Kaddish and Kedusha which necessitates getting together, we had no shuls. And that took a long time. Because even according to the Rambam, the tefillah is min haTorah, the very first halach in Hilchas Tefillah in the Rambam, Mitzvah, l'spalel, kol yom. You have 24 hours to say just one tefillah. Moidani lefonecha, melech chai v'kayim, shechzarto b'nishmos yir yoytze. And you could say that whenever you want, wherever you want, and it's personal. There was no reason to have shuls until Chazal were metaken devorim shebekdusha, which necessitate a minyan. So the yeshiva is the most important institution in Jewish life. And all I'm saying is a very brief introduction. Take advantage of every moment you have in yeshiva. So that is the importance and the centrality of Talmud Torah in the life of every individual, every community, in the life of Klal Yisrael as a people, as a nation. We are Am HaTorah, and Torah is what keeps us going. How much does a person need to learn? I think I shared this with you here in the past. I assume there are many new Talmidim here. So there are two sugyas in Shas dealing with a fundamental question. How much time does a person need to dedicate to learning every day? Brachas Lamed Heyomid Beis is a machlokes between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. How do we interpret the pasuk in the very first perek in Novi Yehoshua? Lo yomesh sefer haTorah hazeh mepicho v'hogisu bo yomam v'layla. Does that mean all day and all night, or it's some of the day and some of the night? Rabbi Shmuel says it can't mean all day and all night, because in Kriyas Shema we have the pasuk v'osafto degonecha. So obviously we need to plant, we need to sow, we need to plow, we need to harvest, we need to eat, and we need to provide. V'osafto degonecha. So v'ogisa b'yom v'layla must mean some of the day, some of the night. And Rabbi Shimon disagrees, and he says v'ogisa b'yom v'layla means all day and all night. What about v'osafto degonecha? And in the first shot of Nefesh HaChaim, Reb Chaim of Roshan struggles. How could we say this posuk is B'shosha Ein Yisrael Oisen Retzoy Shel Mokom? The beginning of the parsha is V'hoyo Im Shomoya Tishmo. We will listen to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's command. We will observe all His mitzvahs. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bless us with abundance and plenty. V'osafto degonecha. So Reb Chaim Volozhin has some very delicate and complicated interpretations in what does it mean, Ein Yisrael Oisen Retzoy Shel Mokom. But Reb Shimon insists, if we would all learn all day and all night, Va'amdu zorim ura'u tzonchem. Others will come, miktzei oilam, from faraway places, and they will take care of our produce and our fields, and we would all learn day and night. So Reb Shimon is the one that insists. V'ogisa b'yom v'layla means all day and all night, and Rabbi Shmuel says no. Haneg behem minag derech eretz. Menachas Tzadik Testament based is another sugya, and both Reb Shimon and Rabbi Shmuel contradict their own words from Brachas Lamed to Menachas Tzadik Tes. Omer Reb Yochanan, Omer Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. And this is an amazing phenomenon I really never come to grips with. Throughout Shas, there are dozens of Mamorim, Reb Yochanan quoting Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Reb Yochanan couldn't possibly see Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Reb Yochanan was the very first generation of Ameroim. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai is the Talmud of Reb Akiva. But Reb Yochanan, more than anyone else, quotes Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. And going far beyond that, there's a Yerushalmi, and the Yerushalmi says, Reb Yochanan says, many people quote Reb Shimon Bar Yochai incorrectly. Reb Yochanan sees himself as the authority on the Torah of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. So Reb Yochanan quotes Reb Shimon Bar Yochai in Menachas Tzadik Tes. Afilu leikora elo kriyas shema shachris va'arves. He was Makayim the mitzvah of Ogisu bo yomam v'layla. Kriyas shema shachris va'arves is enough to be yoitza v'ogisu bo yomam v'layla, that very same posuk. And in that very same sugya, Shaul ben Doma, ben achoisoi shel Rabbi Shmuel, in Yerushalmi it's Rabbi Yehoshua. But in Bavli, Menachas Tzadik Tes, it is Rabbi Shmuel. אני שלמדתי כל התורה כולה, מה אני ללמד חכמי יוונס? I am interested in Greek philosophy. Is that okay? Is that legitimate? And Rabbi Shmuel says, maybe, but you need to find time that is neither Yom nor Laila. Because the Pasuk says, Vogisu bo yomam v'layla. Your days and nights need to be dedicated to Torah. So if you could find some time that's neither Yom or Laila, you could learn Greek philosophy. He's not going to get very far if all he could dedicate is, I think maybe Bein Hashmoshes Keherafine would be defined as Einoi lo Yom v'lo Laila. I don't know. He's not going to be a great philosopher. So Rabbi Shmuel in Brachas Lamed says, Hanik be'menik derech eretz, v'osafta duganecha. And he in Menachos says, B'shosha eina lo yom v'lo laila. Reb Shimon says, you need to learn all day and all night in Brachas, and he says, Kriya Shema Shachas v'Harvest. So fundamentally, this could be a very long shiur, but we don't have that much time. The Ran, Nedorim Daf Ches Amud Aleph, and that is the only other source in Shas in which we learn Kriya Shema Shachas v'Harvest is enough to be Makayim V'Gisu B'Yom Yomam V'Layla. The Ran explains, beyond V'Gisu B'Yom V'Layla, Chayav Adam Lilmoid Kefi Koichoi. And that is because Vishinantom Levonecho, Shiur Divrei Torah Mechudodim Beficho. V'Gisu B'Yom V'Layla is Sefer Yoshua, it's Divrei Neviim, it's not Torah's Moshe. The more important source in Torah's Moshe is Vishinantom, Shiur Divrei Torah Mechudodim Beficho. So let me make a short confession. No one knows everything. No one knows everything. I might know more Torah than most of the people in this room. So the difference between me and you on a scale of 100 would be 2 or 3 points, maybe 5 points, maybe 6 points. Torah is huge. Arucha me'eretz mido, urechavo miniyam. No one knows everything. So the posuk and the drosha, Shiur Divrei Torah Mechudodim Beficho, means as best as you can. It is a goal we strive to. It is a destination we hope we will somehow come close to. Do your best, Shiur Divrei Torah Mechudodim Beficho. And I think the Ran writes a very clear definition, Kefi Koichoi. And only HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what is Kefi Koichoi. And it depends on so many different factors. It depends on so many different factors. Your personality, your patience, your talent, your family, your parnasa. Kol echod lefi koichoi, and only haboichin kaloyes v'leiv, only HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be able to judge every person. How far does that go? Kefi koichoi. But we need to do our best, each and every one of us, to learn kefi koichoi. This is a story I said many, many times. I probably quoted this story hundreds of times because I like it a lot. When Rav Henkin, who was the Gadol Hador in America before Reb Moshe's huge genius, overshadowed everyone else in America. But Rav Henkin was considered one of the greatest Gedolim of our time, Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Henkin. And when the Chazon Ish passed away, in his hesped, he told a story. And he said, I first met the Chazon Ish in a little Russian town called Stovzi, and I came to visit the Rav. And as I came into the Rav's office, the Chazon Ish walked out. I didn't know who he is. And I asked him, who are you? And he said, I'm the son of the Rav of Kosovo. That's not Kosovo, part of, Serbia. And it's a little town in Russia. I think it's in the Ukraine. And I asked him, what do you do? And he said, we run a shop. Because the Chazon Ish's wife worked in a shop. So he said, we run a shop. Do you learn? I asked him. And he said, when I have time, I learn. obviously had a lot of time, obviously. But the Chazon Ish said, when I have time, I learn. And I asked him, why did you come to see the Rav? The Rav called. And when the Rav calls, you come. End of the conversation. Obviously, the Chazon Ish wasn't a great schmoozer. He wasn't a very engaging conversationist. Very short conversation. And this short exchange is so much anova and so smart. So he said, when I have time, I learn. And that is the exact definition of Mitzvahs Talmud Torah. When you have time, you need to learn. When you don't have time, you don't need to learn. But whenever I tell the story, I advise people, La'acha me'ah ve'esem, when they're going to ask this very same question up there, did you learn? Don't dare to say, when I had time, I learned. Don't dare to quote the Chazon Ish's line, because then they'll say, really? You think so? We have a video clip up here of every day, and they will start running those clips, and you will feel very uncomfortable. Koivish punav bekarka. So don't say, when I had time, I learned. But that is what every Yid is required to do. When you have time, you need to learn. And that is why any mitzvah she'i efshel hakayim al yedei acherim overrides Talmud Torah. I have many mitzvahs to do. I have no time to learn right now. We all know there's a mitzvah d'oraisa to teach your children Torah. V'limadetem moisem es b'neichem. V'shinantam levonecho is talmidim. But every decent father knows that sometimes you need to play with your kids as well, and not only teach them Torah. And that is not only legitimate, it is essential. If you want to bring up a healthy family and healthy children, sometimes parents play with their kids as well. At least I did when I had little kids, and I do the same with my einaklach. And that is also legitimate. So when I feel I need to play with my kids, I don't have time to learn. But the principle is, as the Chazon Ish said, when I have time, I learn, and try to do your best. The Rambam was the greatest teacher of Torah, maybe in many generations. And the Rambam's opinion is, every person needs to work, and it is totally unacceptable and illegitimate to make parnosa from Torah. And the Rambam writes his opinion in Hilchas Talmud Torah, Perek Gimel Halacha Yud, Matnas Ani and Perek Yud, Halacha Yud Ches, and at great length in Masechet Avos, Perek Daled, Mishnah Vav. So let me ask our precious Talmidim, who is maybe the greatest commentator of the Rambam? Who is one of the greatest commentators of the Rambam? Huh? The Ravid definitely is not a commentator of the Rambam. No, that is not a right description. The Ravid, in a way, is the nemesis of the Rambam. Now that's a negative expression, but he's the big parplukta of the Rambam. He doesn't seem to agree with anything the Rambam says. Kesef Mishnah, Magid Mishnah. So this is just interesting yediyas. B'nai Torah need to have these yediyas. The Radbaz writes that the Magid Mishnah is more reliable in explaining the Rambam than any other Rishon. And I say, why is that? Was the Magid Mishnah greater than the Ramban or the Rashba? Why is he more reliable than anyone else? And I say, because the Magid Mishnah lived in the Rambam's house. So he knew the Rambam in a very intimate way. The Rashba had his own house. Where's the Rashba's house? If anybody is familiar, Torah Sabayis. So the Rashba has his own home, the Ramban is a Godel in his own merit, but the Magid Mishnah is a Ben Bayis. So he's more reliable than anyone else. Not because he was greater than the others, because he knew the Rambam more intimately. I don't mean to say he actually lived in the Rambam's home. I'm speaking in a poetic way. The Maggid Mishnah is with the Rambam, and the Kesef Mishnah as well. And nowhere else does the Kesef Mishnah dare to say that Rambam isn't right. Here the Kesef Mishnah says that Rambam isn't right. And all the Gedolei Hador in his time and all the generations after said, Klal Yisrael needs to support Talmidei Chachamim. And the real Talmidei Chachamim need to dedicate V'ogisu bo yomam v'layla. And they need to dedicate all their time to just learn and teach Torah. The Tashbitz was more than 100 years younger than the Rambam, but he is the big bar plukta of the Rambam. And in Tshuvas HaTashbitz Chelak Aleph Kuf Mem Beis to Kuf Mem Ches, he has a whole series of tshuvas coming out against the Rambam. The Rambam writes, Hillel HaZoken was a Choytev Eitzim. Shammai was in construction. He was a builder. Amasa binyan shebiyadoi. And the Tashbitz says, you really think so? When Hillel was the Nosi, he still chopped wood? Well, Hillel HaZoken wasn't born Hillel HaZoken, says the Tashbitz. Probably as a younger man, a 20-year-old or an 18-year-old, Ben Shmoynes Elachopi, chopped wood. He wasn't Hillel HaZoken, renowned in the entire Torah world. But as he came of age, probably they all dedicated their days and nights and all their life to teach Torah. So the Kesef Mishnah, at the end of his lengthy discussion, says, even the Rambam would agree, a choila v'zoken that can't work, definitely is entitled to be supported by others. And I think that in our day and age, and not only in our day and age, but going back 500 years to the Kesef Mishnah, going back 700 years to the Tashbitz, it became obvious that if you want to be a Gadol Hador or a great teacher of Torah, you cannot work as well. And those that will lead Klal Yisrael and teach Torah to the masses, yes, should be supported and should dedicate all their time, V'ogisa b'yom v'layla kepashtus. The Torah in Reish Mem Vav quotes the Rambam. He quotes the Rambam as if halacha psuka in Reish Mem Vav in Yoreh Deah. The Beis Yosef brings the controversy, but in Shulchan Aruch he quotes the Rambam, and the Ramah says the minhag is not in accordance to the Rambam, but the minhag is that every community supports some of its members. Aruch HaShulchan has an interesting comment in Siman Reish Mem Vav in Yoreh Deah, and the Aruch HaShulchan says, if a Rav of a community wants to work, and he wants to follow the footsteps of the Rambam, the Kehillah has a right to object and say, sepasnisht. Do you know this word? Did you ever hear these words? Sepasnisht. It's a very popular word in many circles in the Haredi community. How would one say that in English? No, you can't really translate sepasnisht. It is inappropriate. Comes close. And the Kehillah could say, no, we want a full-time rabbi. We want a full-time Rosh Yeshiva. So I know some of your Rosh Yeshivas here, and I'm sitting across my dear friend who is a cardiologist, and another dear friend who is a businessman. I think most of you left your jobs and you're teaching Torah full-time. I don't know. But Rabbi Isaacson, don't object. Don't do what the Aruch HaShulchan says, because I think this is such a great example for our Talmidim, appreciating Torah in our lives. If people of stature, people of accomplishment in medicine, in law, in business are willing to give up their professions or compromise what they're doing to teach Torah. That is such a beautiful example and such important message to get across. Ki heim chayenu v'oirech yomenu uvohem nehege yoimam v'layla. There's no greater endeavor than learning Torah and teaching Torah. There is no more enjoyable endeavor than learning Torah or teaching Torah. Ein simcha kesimchas haTorah pkudei Hashem yeshora mesamchei leiv. So let me say this. I have some Talmidim that are tour guides. And the tour guide says, you know, the people I take around are so excited and they take pictures all the time. But to me, this has become boring. I see the same things every day. I say the same things every day. And I would much rather sit at home with my family. But this is my parnasa. Well, in a way, I'm a tour guide. And I take my Talmidim for tours every day. And it's never boring. And every time I came back to the same site, the same sugya, the same shiur, I said 100 times. But every time I visit the site and every time I learn the sugya, there was always something new. So there's a Yerushalmi both in Masechet Chagiga and Masechet Soita. Ein besmedes beli chidush bekol yom. In Bavli, in the beginning of Chagiga, ein besmedes beli chidush. Yerushalmi, ein besmedes beli chidush bekol yom. And every time I learn a sugya, I've learned 100 times. And I give a shiur. Most of what I taught you today, I have shared in the past. Most of it. But every time there is always something new, something exciting. I'm an old man. And for decades I've been doing exactly the same thing. I'm never bored. I'm never, ever bored. And if I would be given the choice, what do you want to do today? And you could choose anything you would like to do today, I would always choose to do the same. To teach, to learn, to write. So, all these young Talmidim and wonderful Talmidim, and as I said in my opening comments of today's shiur, it's wonderful to see how this yeshiva is growing, not only in numbers, but in quality. I know some of the families. I know this yeshiva has a great name in Chutz La'aretz, and I spend time with people in Chutz La'aretz. So nobody really knows where life is going to take him. Some of you might be doctors, lawyers, businessmen, who knows. I very much hope that some of you will be teachers of Torah. Marbitze Torah b'Yisrael, Moira Hoiroa b'Yisrael. And that is definitely my recommendation. If you want to choose a job, if you want to choose a profession, if you can, teach Torah. Learn Torah. Ashrecha b'yolam hazeh, v'toiv l'cha la'olam haba. So it's a simcha for me to be here, and that's my bracha to all of you. Take advantage of every moment you have in this wonderful yeshiva. And we should hear B'Seiras Toivos and the Rosh Yeshiva. Your wife should have a refuah shalema b'mehera. We have some time for a few questions.
I'm going to answer a question. I'm going to wait. We'll have to go back. But we talked a lot about learning. We have some parents in the room. Some parents are very encouraging of their children continuing, in their learning. Some parents are concerned about parnasa matayaleha, so how does a Talmud navigate, negotiate the challenge of
So you're asking the question from the point of view of the Talmud.
Well, I'm asking Das Torah, how does a Talmud and a parent, how do they come together in...
I think the parnasa concern is a legitimate concern. and a Talmud in the yeshiva, whose parents expect them to come home and take up study, a vocation, to care for his parnasa, it is a legitimate concern, and a parent that has that feeling should not be looked down upon in scorn. It is a legitimate concern. Not all of our children have the potential to be great teachers of Torah. And it definitely is legitimate for a person to plan and to want to provide for his family. But what I could say is, these formative years that a boy spends in yeshiva will affect his entire future. And if a boy is in yeshiva and he's doing well in yeshiva and he is growing in Torah, that is the best investment in these formative years when a boy is a teenager and relatively young. So ultimately, I am quite aware. Not all how many boys have in yeshiva? More than 200. So I don't think that this yeshiva will produce from the present student body 200 Rosh Yeshivas. And not everybody sitting in yeshiva will be a teacher of Torah. But these years are so important in building your personality, your character, based on Torah values, on Avos Torah and Yiras Shamayim. So I definitely would recommend to every parent whose boy is in yeshiva and he's thriving in yeshiva and growing, let him learn as long as he can. But yes, it is a legitimate concern thinking about the future, because not all our kids will be great scholars.
You mentioned that all of our learning should be, all the time we have should be learning. However, obviously people need breaks. How do we balance learning and breaks, and what are some healthy breaks that people?
I think I addressed this question in the shir I just said when I quoted the Ran, Kefi koichoi. Everybody needs a break here and then. Everybody does. And it is part of human nature. It's part of human condition. And as I said, I cannot quantify it in many times when people ask me questions of this nature, with a touch of humor, I say, well, every day at 3 o'clock, 10 minutes and 14 chalokim, you could take a break. But that is language we use only once a month. And we actually used that language yesterday in Berchus HaChodesh. So many things, it's impossible to put into numbers. But everybody needs a break. What is important is to be motivated, enjoy your learning, take advantage and invest in learning, but each individual is different. And we all need some time off. We all need a break. And that is why we say Berchus HaTorah every day in the morning. Every day is a new day.
I apologize if we already answered this, but how do you decide whether to stay in yeshiva or to begin your profession next year, for example?
Once again, I will answer the same way I answered the previous question, and I think I just spoke about this a few minutes ago. I think most of us at some stage realize that we made the most of our stay in yeshiva, and it's time to move on. Most of us have that, you have that feeling, and you have great rabbeim here with whom to discuss and whom to consult. And they care about you. They not only care about the yeshiva, I think they care about their talmidim. So I cannot give a basic rule, as I apologized just a few moments ago. But most of us feel when time has come to move on, when we made the most of our stay in yeshiva. And Baruch Hashem, you have rabbeim that care about you, and I'm sure they will give you proper guidance. Yes?
I think maybe this is due to partially the way that we got to yeshiva. But when we get here, we're sort of exposed very quickly to a lot in Yiddishkeit that might not necessarily be things that we either knew or were exposed to, which is very good. But then at some point, I guess the goal of the Talmud is to try to create that to be one's own Torah and one's own sort of relationship with Hashem. So how does one transition from being exposed initially to someone else's world and then making that your own?
I think a great teacher and a mentor will encourage his Talmidim not only to accept what they're being taught, but really to develop their potential and their ability to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A very famous leader who wasn't Jewish, and therefore I don't like to quote names, said, "I love to learn, but I hate being taught." And a great teacher not only preaches and teaches, but also is a role model and also encourages Talmidim to develop their own potential. So it is wonderful, and it is only natural that coming to yeshiva you will be exposed to sfarm, to literature, to texts you weren't aware of, to ideas you never knew before. But you also need to learn on your own and develop. Every individual is a world, is an olam cotton. And Chazal say, Kishen she'ein partzofeim doimen zelazeh. 250 people sitting in this room, none of them look alike. Kach ein deyosein doimen zelazeh. Our minds are more complex than our faces, and each individual has his own feelings, emotions, attitudes, his own neshama, and great teachers of Torah encourage them to develop their own way and their own closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to Yiddishkeit. So all the questions I've been asked just emphasize my shortcomings in giving very clear answers. Yeah, I only have a minute or two, so I will take these two last questions.
Did Rebbe say the first yeshiva was Abraham's? Did Rebbe say the first yeshiva was Abraham's?
That's what, yeah, you're probably going to ask about Shem Ve'ever.
Yeah.
I think Shem Ve'ever were teachers of Talmud in a university, not really a yeshiva. Because Shem Ve'ever weren't Jewish. They weren't Jewish. So it was like taking a Talmudic course in Harvard or something like that. But the first real Rosh Yeshiva was Avraham Avinu, because he was a Jewish Rosh Yeshiva. So Chazal say, Avraham Zoken v'Yoshev b'Yeshiva. That's my feeling. Take what I say with a little drop of humor, but I think our first Rosh Yeshiva was Avraham Avinu. Shem Ve'ever were Bnei Noach. And we are no longer Bnei Noach. We are no longer Bnei Noach.
We live in Tavshin Tevav, so we see technology advancing very, very rapidly. And one of those main things is ChatGPT and AI. And I think we've all heard different things across the spectrum, from the greatest tool ever invented and should be used for Avodas HaKodesh to something we should stay far, far away from. Should we live in one of the extremes? Is there a Derech HaMamutza, Shvil Azam in the middle?
Like almost every technological breakthrough, it's a double-edged sword. When Gutenberg produced the first printing press, it changed the world. And it's an interesting historical phenomenon. The Jews embraced the printing press and took great advantage and immediately starting printing Sifrei Kodesh. The Christian world hated the printing press and they fought against it. Some people were hanged for printing their works because they were afraid of the masses becoming too knowledgeable and they will challenge the clerics. while the Jews saw this as such a blessing, v'chol banayach lemudei Hashem. But it changed the world. So the internet and digital technology, once again, is a huge challenge to our chinuch. And we don't even need to speak about this at great length, about the pitfalls and the dangers of digital technology, which is maybe the biggest challenge of our chinuch in today's world. On the other hand, the level of Albotzes Torah is unbelievable. I got a letter, Rosh Hashanah, from Kol HaLashon, that in Tavshin Pei Hey there were more than almost 600,000 downloads and people listening to my Shiur. And that's only Kol HaLashon. And it would be the same in Torah Anytime or our website, which is Minchas Osher, or many others. And I'm not on YouTube, but there's somebody, putting my shiur on YouTube, and he told me that about 6 or 7 months ago, we had over 1 million. So these are numbers which are unprecedented and impossible in any other way. I don't think there ever was a yeshiva that had 1 million people listening to a shiurim through 1 year. So, like so many different things, it's a double-edged sword, a curse and a blessing. And we just need to know how to navigate in these troubled times and troubled waters, uncharted waters, and probably the same with AI. I don't even think we appreciate and understand where this is going. But in halacha, it definitely is a huge problem, because already people are using AI to ask questions and learning, and in halacha, which is definitely bad and harmful. So Chazal say, Lasuk Shmaitze Siyata Dishmaya. To give halachic ruling, you need Siyata Dishmaya. Would AI have Siyata Dishmaya? On what merit? On the mitzvahs it performed, on its dedication to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But it is bad in many levels. And some doctors asked me, a doctor recently asked me, I have a patient, based on my 40 years of experience and expertise, I would take a certain course of action, but AI says differently, and I believe he knows better. What am I supposed to do? Follow my understanding based on my experience, or just say, AI knows better, and do what he recommends? And this is a huge problem and dilemma. We have some doctors sitting here. I'm not sure my response was so wise, but I said, take advantage of what AI has to say, analyze, try to check and analyze and think about what he suggests. But ultimately, it's your call, and you cannot take any course of action which goes against your intuition and your understanding. Take advantage of all the data you could have. So I think in halacha it is a huge pitfall, and the dangers are far beyond halacha. But I don't think we even understand at this stage where this is going and what the problems would be. So it was a pleasure to be with you today, like every time in the past, and Bezrat Hashem in the future as well. And my bracha to all the great teachers of Torah sitting in this room, and to all the Talmidim. You should all have Siyata Dishmaya, and wherever life takes you, when you need to leave the yeshiva, take the yeshiva along with you, and all your life, whatever you do, and you should always be Bnei Torah, and always remember the spirit that you have absorbed in this wonderful yeshiva. Shenizkeh b'korah b'yomeinu, liyeshua seilamim, and we should see Pnei Moshiach Tzidkenu b'mheru v'yomeinu. Amen.